I was recently speaking to a mother who described herself, when the subject of her children's father came up, as a mummy on my own. This struck me as a strange form of words to use, until I realised she was doing everything she could to avoid being labelled with the ultimate stigma, that of a single mother. We have a long history of blaming social problems on women. Now one NHS body has had to apologise for refusing IVF to single women on the basis they are a burden on society and unable to bring out the best outcomes for the child. We all know the NHS has limited resources. I think it should think again about how important it is to support single people who want fertility treatment. After all, these are children who would be desperately wanted and valued. But if we really can't afford it, then put it down to a lack of money, not the single mothers who are frankly more likely to deserve a medal than a slap in the face like this.
Firstly, I think it's important that we stop press because we finally found a topic that I agree with you on. I never thought I would see the day, and I agree with Afua. I completely agree with you, and before I get into the reasons why, let's just hear from Andrew Bland from the NHS South East. He says, I would like to apologise for any offence and distress caused by both the wording in the South East London treatment access policy in relation to single women's access to IVF treatment and the review document it refers to. We agree this wording is not acceptable and we will take action to address this as we conduct a rapid review of the policy in relation to access criteria for funding IVF. So, that aside, I completely agree with you. There is still a stigma on single mums and it's absolutely shocking. Now, the NHS has got it's got lots of challenges, not least funding challenges, and whether or not the NHS should be funding IVF is something that's always a bone of contention. I do believe that it should be offering people at least one round if that's what they want to do to be a parent. But I had an experience in Hull, and I won't name the clinic, but when I tried to freeze my eggs, because I wasn't in a situation to have children, I was denied the opportunity to freeze my eggs as a private paying patient. So nothing to do with the NHS. And when I asked them, why would you not freeze my eggs, they told me that their policy was not to do egg freezing for those that have chosen it for lifestyle reasons. I was so enraged because they viewed my reasons for not having a child yet to be a lifestyle choice as opposed to anything else, and that infuriated me. That was a private clinic.
Do you mean because it wasn't to do with infertility, but you weren't ready?
Yeah, so what they said is, for example, if I unfortunately had cancer and I was going through some treatment and I physically had to freeze eggs because I had no choice, they would do it. But because I was just wanting to do it because I didn't have a partner, etc., they were unwilling to take my money to do that. And that is the state of people's perceptions sometimes when it comes to fertility. I think that single mums, especially solo mums by choice, they know what they're going into, they've made this decision, they're going into it often with eyes open, and to call them burdens like this is a disgrace.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
By the way, I agree with what you say. I don't. Perhaps there is a stigma for single-parent mothers. That's awful. But it's not. We've often said the NHS is not a bottomless pit. You agree with that?
Agreed.
You're presented, and you've got enough funding to fund one woman one is a wife with a husband, and the other is a single woman. Who are you going to give it to?
Well, if you're only going to be able to fund
you can only fund one.
person,
Who's going to get it?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how you make that decision, but you
it's
certainly...
precisely, isn't it?
Your decision-making criteria shouldn't be based on their relationship status.
So what will determine your decision? Which of those two women, one has a husband or a partner, one is a single or lone parent, who's going to get the cash?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how they make a decision.
Well, how are you going to make that decision?
Well, probably flip a coin, because they're both equal scenarios.
That's a great way to run medicine, flipping a coin.
Are you suggesting that you should prioritise the couple?
I'm asking
what
you do.
I think this...
Well, what would you do?
This reflects the dilemma that it is really difficult to choose. I think you should establish a set of objective criteria, which is very difficult to do, because I don't think that you can decide whether someone's more deserving of having a chance based on their relationship status. Or where they live, which is currently actually what determines it for most people. It's a postcode lottery.
Can I say?
No, hang on, that's not. You can't do that. You can't put a dilemma onto me and Afua, and then when I put it back to you, say I'm not going to answer it.
Michelle, don't you think that? But I'm sure this is occurring all the time because resources are so limited. But I just find this a very difficult debate because we've read this week in the papers our cancer clear-up rates in this country are abominable.
Yeah.
There are problems with early diagnosis. We've got continuing problems with the NHS. We've got pressure for obese people and smokers to be required to pay for their treatment, even though they've been paying their taxes. And yet we say we can provide money to give single women IVF because they think they're now ready to have a child. I'm sorry, I think we've got to make decisions based on the fact the NHS there is to cure illness and disease, not dissatisfaction.
I think that is the debate, really.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of the NHS? But I'd be very careful about dismissing the quest of people who want to have children and need IVF to do it as some kind of flippant, cosmetic thing.
It's a heartbreaking position for people to be in if they can't have children and they want the state to help them. But when the state has got so much pressure on resources and we've got people dying of cancer who shouldn't be dying, half of people who get diagnosed with cancer, this cancer's already spread. There's something going seriously wrong with the NHS and we're spending money on wrong priorities.
I would agree with that, but I think we need to be thinking about how to develop a modern NHS that can meet the realistic needs of people across the board, not just, and of course, treating cancer should be an absolute priority and other serious illness, but I don't think we should confine our ambition to that. I think that IVF is something that we should be able to offer in a fair way across the country, because at the moment some people can get up to 3 cycles, some people get none.
Two things. One, it's important to mention that the NICE fertility guidelines say that women under 40 should receive at least 3 full cycles of IVF. And right now, well, 60% are getting 1 or a partial one, 23% are getting 2 cycles, and 13% are getting the full 3. Right. So there's that. There's also the language that you use, the idea of single mothers being a burden on society. That, and it's what you've said earlier, Afua, the idea of constantly blaming the woman. I mean, most women who find themselves as single mothers, if there was an available partner who could help them raise that child, who was responsible, who they could rely on, they'd obviously choose that. But to blame the woman for the absence of someone to help her is ridiculous.
But where are you on Andrew's point, that, indeed Michelle, that it's not a bottomless pit? And Andrew makes a fair point, does he not, that if we're not able to look after people who have cancer, who've paid in their taxes in some instances for decades, how is the funding to be addressed, Femi? How would you do? But please don't say, well, we just need to find money, because we can't.
It's a false binary to say either we treat cancer or we fund IVF.
No, it isn't. And
because
people,
we all agree that cancer needs to be treated.
And people waiting 5 years for a hip operation. Are these not priorities?
Yes,
are they
they're
not?
priorities.
And I think they're more. I'm sorry, I think they're more important.
But the current situation is that this NHS body that we were talking about, and I know that they've apologised now, didn't say the reason we're not funding.
The language was terrible.
They didn't.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The language reflects something deeper. They didn't say we can't afford it, which I accept. We do have limited resources. It's heartbreaking, but a rational conversation does need to take place about what we can fund on the NHS. But they said that it's not desirable for single women to have IVF because they become a burden on society.
Yeah,
I think that view does exist.
But I think they've made the choice already, which Nick put to Michelle. If there's a married couple or couple versus a single mother, they're going to go for
I'm
the couple.
curious, Nick, because I know you were a single dad raising your boys. Did you know this stigma that exists towards single mothers? Did you feel that there's anything of that towards a single father, or was it a different?
Honestly, I never experienced it. I really didn't experience it, and I was actually going to pick either you, because, and I mean, perhaps because I was a little bit in the world as a single dad, but do you think there is still then a single mum stigma?
Well, it's there. I just read it out.
Sorry, but no, absolutely, and they've apologised. But more broadly, do you still think society is almost like, I don't know, the 70s or the 60s? You still think it's out there?
I do. I mean, a debate we have quite frequently is about knife crime, right? The serious problem of knife crime. How many times do we hear politicians saying it's because of single mums? It's because that black boys are being raised by single mums, as if the women doing a difficult job of raising children on their own are somehow the cause of social breakdown. I think that narrative still exists. I'm not accusing you of it, but I think it exists in society. And I see this NHS statement as one symptom. And even this mother that I mentioned in my intro, you know, people are devising all kinds of language to get out of any prospect of people labelling them single mums. And I think it reflects a deeper attitude towards them.
Well, my advice to someone, if they're feeling stigmatised about being a single parent, is own it and just get on with it, because you rock the work that they're doing on their own. So good on you.